Like unmarked graves, the portraits from the Holtermann collection have laid dormant in the vaults of the State Library of New South Wales in Sydney for over 7 decades. They now rest in their cryogenic black and white state, seemingly without a past or a future. Their fixed gazes stare back at us as frozen subjects from history. But who were they? By researching each individual, and as more and more details are discovered, they will slowly regain the colour they once had, but more importantly, their personality that has eluded them for over 150 years. Come with us back in time as we attempt to bring these forgotten strangers back to life. This elegant little lady is identified in the collection as A2824064. She stands out in the collection due to her immaculate clothing and elaborate hairstyle, and for such a young girl during this time, she also oozes confidence and composure under the pressure of the 10-second exposure time, even managing to offer a hint of a smile. But behind the facade of this seemingly happy little beauty queen lurks a controlling presence that would ultimately bring a slow and painful end. But who was she?
I'll never let you go. Never.
If you watched the resurrection of Mrs. Poole in a previous episode, you would now know that the first step in identifying the subject in the photograph is by focusing on the deliberate etching on the reverse side of the glass plate and at the very top of the photo. When reversed, the subject's name then becomes apparent, and in this case, the elegant little lady is now identified as Miss Montgomery. Including this image, subsequent searching reveals that Miss Montgomery appears in at least 6 separate portraits, one even pictured with her little dog. And as more and more images are uncovered, the more she evolves from Miss Montgomery to Miss A. Montgomery, then Miss Adelaide Montgomery, and finally, Miss Adelaide Griffith Montgomery. By the time these portraits were taken in 1872, Adelaide was just 12 years of age and was enrolled in the Hill End Public School, along with her 2 older brothers, William and Edwin. If you take a close look at the class of 72 photo, Adelaide is unmistakably clear in her trademark winter coat, but otherwise a more practical hairstyle. Fortunately, the school enrolment not only lists the siblings of the student, but also that of the parents, where they resided, and their occupations at the time of their child's enrolment. Sadly, this record also reveals the developing cracks within the fractured Montgomery home. In most cases, the father and his occupation are usually listed for the pupil on the enrolment. However, by studying the admission for Adelaide, her father is otherwise replaced by her mother, and her name was Grace. The record also states that Grace Montgomery was a dressmaker and milliner, and in both Tambaroora Street and Clark Street Hill End. When searching the name Montgomery within the Holtermann collection, Adelaide is predominantly featured. However, it also features several others, namely 2 young boys whose names match that of her brothers William and Edwin, and in addition, 2 separate portraits titled Mrs. Grace Montgomery, Dressmaker. This is Grace Montgomery, mother of Adelaide. Not much is known about Grace Montgomery, other than she was born Grace Pascoe in 1838, location unknown. Grace married an American by the name of Hiram Atkinson Montgomery shortly before 1857, when their first child, William, was born. It's also unclear where their marriage or the birth of their son took place. However, by the following year, a second child named Edwin was born in the New South Wales south coast town of Browley. The Montgomerys then spent Christmas Day 1861 with the birth of Adelaide, 80 kilometres to the north, in the town of Braidwood. It's hard to ascertain as to when they arrived in Hill End. However, by 1872, and referring to the school admissions, Adelaide's father is by then out of the picture. It is also hard to determine if Adelaide's parents had separated, where her father then found himself in Sydney, while her mother Grace and two brothers remained in Hill End, or they went to Sydney first. Either way, it was a case of separation, or death do us part. Adelaide's father, Hiram Montgomery, passed away in Sydney on the 30th of June 1864, when she was just 3 years old. Adelaide's eldest brother, William, would go on to live until he was 80 years of age, where he died in the Sydney suburb of Marrickville on the 16th of April 1937. It's a clear indication that the Montgomerys, or at least her other brother Edwin, remained in Hill End to at least 1880. There is no record of Edwin ever being married. Future records reveal that their mother Grace was an extremely religious woman and trusted in God to guide them through sickness and in health, and therefore refused all medical advice or medication. It's possible that Edwin was still under the control of his mother, as he passed away in Hill End on the 23rd of October 1880, at an otherwise healthy age of just 23. Their mother Grace somehow managed to navigate life in seemingly good health, with or without the support of her beloved Lord. When at the age of 55, she is then living with her brother and his wife in the inner city Sydney suburb of Leichhardt. It is here she joins and attends an organisation known as the True Gospelists in nearby Renwick Street, otherwise known as the Exclusives.
Just relax. It'll all be over soon. Don't scream.
Grace Warden Montgomery, née Pascoe, passed away on the 18th of September 1912 at Casterton Street, Hurlston Park in Sydney, at the respectful age of 74. As with her brother Edwin, Adelaide never married and was also still residing in the same house under the influence of her strict mother in Leichhardt at the age of 32. By January 1893, Adelaide had become quite ill, and in the following days, her health had deteriorated dramatically. Her mother Grace attended to her night and day but still refused any medical attention, otherwise keeping faith and having the opinion that God would see her through. On the 16th of January 1893, Grace's brother and wife was concerned that the coughing had ceased and the room where Adelaide laid bedridden for several days had fallen silent.
Goodbye, baby.
When questioned, Grace replied that Adelaide had fallen asleep, but when the same silence persisted for several days, her brother called for a doctor, and when he arrived, it was discovered she had been dead for 4 or 5 days. The case of the sad demise of Adelaide Montgomery was widely reported in newspapers around the country, covering the coroner's hearing and labelling the unfortunate incident as the result of a religious cult. The coroner's report concluded that Adelaide was quite emancipated and well in the process of decomposition. He added that her chest and back had turned black and was discharging gas, but otherwise was well cared for and had no sign of physical abuse. When questioned in defence about why she failed to report it to police, Grace replied that, "My daughter had gone to sleep on Monday, and I was waiting until Sunday for God to wake her up again." Grace was completely exonerated for any wrongdoing and was freed to leave with a clear conscience. Adelaide Griffiths Montgomery walked into the valley of the shadow of death on the 16th of January 1893 under the reassuring presence of her mother. She was just 32 years old.
Together.
May you now rest in peace.